On the front, he didn't get on the front line. He was actually a I don't know exactly what they call it. It was like they did maintenance on the bombers, but he was actually in Italy. But that's where the base was for these planes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in Italy. He didn't really face combat, but he was all the way through World War II too. But my uncle, the other uncle, he died in Corregidor very early in the war. That death march was a horrible thing. I suppose you've studied it some,
Yeah.
but it was a horrible thing. They almost all of them died.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. So, and I didn't really know him. The other uncle, after he came home, I knew very well. But the one that died, I was just a little 3 years old when he went to the army.
Mm.
So I didn't really know him.
So your Grandpa Marsh, how big of an impact did he have on your life, you think?
Oh, he had a lot to do with my life because he was really my hero.
Really?
Because he'd done everything. He'd left home when he was like 12 years old because, well, some family things, they didn't get along.
Mm.
Anyway, he reconciled with his family, but he left home when he was 12 years old.
Mm.
And he knew so they studied stuff. He only went to like 8 grades in school, but he knew algebra and he could recite almost whole books. There used to be a lot of books that young people read. It was called Arkansas Traveler books. He could almost recite them to you without, not read them, just he knew them. Knew almost the whole books.
Wow.
Very exciting man. And he was a kind of a genius mechanically. He worked for the J.I. Case Company, who was, at those days, all the big threshing, they didn't have like tractors and combines and stuff. They had these big, huge machines, what they called a threshing machine, and they were operated by steam engines.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of a genius at putting them together and maintaining them. And his family actually had a threshing company that owned one of these machines. It was kind of like custom combiners are now. The other farmers would pay him to pull the threshing machine and set up and thresh all their grain. So he actually was working for J.I. Case Company, which there you still hear of Case tractors, but back then they were the biggie.
Mm-hmm.
And they made these steam threshing machines. My granddad could set them up and maintain them when they blew up, and because they were always boilers exploded, and they were a horrible thing to work on,
Huh.
And then there was some big ranchers from South America, Argentina, hired him to go to South America and maintain. They owned humongous big farms.
Mm-hmm.
They called them Dons, and they owned thousands and thousands of acres. So each ranch, they'd own their own threshing machines, and my granddad would keep them going and running.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long he was down there, but he did that. After he was working around Stanford and in that country in Great Falls, and then they owned a homestead up by Fort Benton. So he worked at that, and my granddad wasn't too successful monetarily because everything he had to give away. If somebody needed something, he'd give it to him. And he was that way his whole life. He just was. He never had much he never gained much. He fed his family and took care of everybody, but if he come into anything and somebody needed something, he'd give it to them. He was just that kind of guy, and to own stuff himself, he never worked very good. He hit when they owned the homestead, it was during the real bad drought. We had like 7 or 8 years, and I can remember him talking about this bad drought, that the crops it was so dry that the wheat wouldn't even germinate, it wouldn't even come up. And so he was there for 7 years, just scraping out a living, terrible conditions. And the 7th year he got pretty good crop. And a threshing outfit came in and asked them if they could thresh. And this was the time they started doing their own threshing. The steam threshing were kind of dying out. But they had these custom outfits that would go around. Well, anyway, they asked him if he wanted to have his done by them, and he said, no, I waited 7 years to get a crop on this sucker. I'll do it myself. So, and the next day it hailed, and he lost the whole crop.
No.
He lost it all. So then they gave up on the homestead and left. Yeah. And then he ended up, he was a fireman. Well, actually, he was a fireman on the Great Northern Railroad.
Oh, wow.
During the time they lived on this farm to keep the farm going. They had to have another job because that's how bad the farming was. So they didn't make nothing. And my grandma had to learn how to shoot a gun. She hated guns, and she shot 50 rattlesnakes the first year they were on the homestead. So, you know, it was a terrible life when you think of how soft we have it. You know, those people were tough. They had to be to survive. So,
wow. He did do it all, didn't he? It sounded like he did it all. What was the greatest, what's your greatest memory of your Grandpa Marsh?
Oh boy, there's a lot of them. He was such a fascinating man. He really was. I don't really think I could just pick out one thing because he had done so many things. And, you know, he was just kind of my hero. There wasn't much.
Is there one memory that sticks to your mind that you always just kind of think of?
Well, mostly it's kind of secondhand stuff. He told me stuff, you know, like he'd tell me how they used to kill rattlesnakes. They'd grab them by the tail and snap their heads. And you got to be fast. I can tell you this from experience.
You
got to be fast. I tried it and I almost got bit. So anyway, and I tried it because he told me about it. But they used to do it. I found out later years from other people that they actually did do that. You know, if you're quick enough, but you grab them, boy, you had to really do it quick because they can turn so quick, you know. So he did. But I remember that, and I was always so fascinated by everything that he'd done in life, you know. And I wish I would have had enough to think to do something like this, to record the things that he did. When he first came to Montana, he had an uncle that was a bachelor uncle, and he was a real party man. And he had a mining claim up by Clancy, and he had a little placer, what they call the placer mining operation, and because it was a pretty good spot. There was a lot of gold up in that country. He had this placer mining thing, and they made a pond, because placer mining, you use a hydraulic hose, you use water, you wash the ore down with gravel or with water, and then you can just pick up well, he had these coolies, Chinese men, I don't know if that's a derogatory term, but that's what they used to call the Chinese laborers that come up, and they didn't pay him much, but what he would have, his uncle would have them help him with this, because the pond, in the springtime when all the snow melt, the pond would fill up. Well, then you could use the placer operation to wash all the gold down. Well, then he'd take all this gold off, and when the pond went dry, they ran out of water. Well, then the poor coolies, whatever they could pick up, that was what the money they made. And he'd go to San Francisco and spend a week in the drinking and whoring, spend all the money. And my granddad said he did that for I don't know how many years, and said at the end of the time, by the time the claim washed out, he says all those Chinamen were all rich. And he didn't have anything. He spent it all. So I always remembered that one was a pretty good one.
That's funny.
I think his uncle was Charlie too. Charlie something, but anyway.
Yeah. So when you lived with your grandparents, and then your mom was out in Washington, right?
Well, yeah, she was out in Washington.
Where at in Washington?
It was Olympia, Washington.
Did you?
Yeah, she just had a menial job that she could have had a better job staying in Montana and teaching,
Yeah.
but
She just had to get out.
she headed out because she thought a new life and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, you know.
So, did you ever go to Washington, Olympia,
I
Washington?
went out there. She took me out there, but she couldn't get babysitting, and it was a horrible. I still remember that, and I was very young, and
Really?
it was a horrible life. She couldn't find anybody to stay with, for me to stay with when she was working, and I stayed with some ornery old bag. I'd like to call her something else, but you're recording this.
Well, who'd you stay with? Who?
Her name was Mrs. God, I don't think I'd ever forget it. But she had a whole bunch of other kids, and she was a mean old gal.
Really?
I hated that, man. I just hated it so bad. Finally, my mom decided she was going to send me back to Montana, so she stuck me on a train. It was in the middle of the winter, and my grandparents met me up in Shelby, the Great Northern
So
Ranch.
you took a train. How old were you?
I'm about 3.
By yourself?
Came
Holy
back
crap!
from Montana by myself. And I can remember my grandparents came from Conrad. Shelby, I think, is about 50, 60 miles. The main route of the Great Northern was through Shelby. My grandparents came up from Conrad, and they picked me up, and it came, and this train was in the middle of the night, and it was snowing so hard you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I can still remember that. My grandparents made it up there to pick me up, take me back to Conrad.
Wow.
That was a horrible experience. The
Really?
whole thing was horrible.
Terrible?
Part of my life.
So then you guys so you went to Conrad,
I stayed
and
in
then
Conrad.
when did you move to? Then you moved
Well-
to Roundup when?
Well, my mom decided after, I don't know how long she stayed out of Olympia, she decided that wasn't working. There was no sense of her being way out there, and she could have made more money
Yeah.
probably teaching in Montana. Well, teaching paid crap anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know, she might as well be back in Montana for no more than what she was doing out there. Because she had a sister that went out there and had a job as an aircraft mechanic, if you can believe that.
Oh really? Wow.
And she made big money during World War II.
Really?
Oh yeah,
That's impressive.
yeah. But she took after her dad. She took off after my grandfather.
Really?
I mean, she had mechanical abilities. You know, my mom didn't have anything like that. She couldn't repair, blow up a tire. She didn't have mechanical ability, but my aunt did, and she had a really good job working on an aircraft factory. I don't know what they call it. It wasn't assembling. It was kind of repairing ones that had been shot up, and they'd bring them back and get them fixed.
So what year did you move into Roundup?
1949.
1949. And what grade were you in?
I was in 7th grade.
7th grade. What about
Yeah.
You went to where? Where'd you go to school at again? In 7th grade.
Huh?
Where'd you go to school at in 7th grade? Was
Yeah,
it? Was your-
7th grade Roundup. I went to junior high and high school. I went to Roundup.
Junior high? Were you involved in anything sports?
Not much.
Oh,
I tried to play basketball, but I was still younger than everybody. I was 2 years younger than everybody. It didn't work very good.
Did you have a job then?
Kind of. My dad bought that gas station. That was my main pastime, working.
Really?
Yeah, I worked at the gas. I did try to play football and basketball, but I was
So you worked at this gas station. What was the gas station called? Was it
Stoner's Hilltop, Texaco.
really? So what'd you have to do there?
Oh, I did about everything. In them days, cars took a lot more maintenance. They did now. They used to have what they call a grease job. You had to grease all these little, they called them zerks. You had to grease about 40 different spots on a car.
Really?
Yeah. You had, well, everything on a car in them days, you had to put oil or grease or something in it, you know. Wasn't like now where you just sit and drive them.
Yeah.
They took a lot of servicing. So we sold gas and oil and changed oil, changed tires, all that kind of stuff, servicing them. So I did that pretty much all the time when I worked and lived in Roundup.
Where'd you guys live in Roundup?
We lived on they call it just the east side of Roundup. 900 block on Second Street East.